DC Universe Rebirth, the biggest comics event of the 21st century. The greatest graphic novels. Volume 1 collections of the best-selling comic books. Get them now wherever graphic novels are sold.
Welcome to the DC Comics booth. My name is Blake. I've got DC Comics Art Academy presentation, so if you guys want to come up close and watch the greater than the 17-time NBA champion Boston Celtics, Freddie Williams II.
Wow. Yay.
Freddie, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good.
Good.
It's Comic-Con
So
next Sunday.
I see you got started already. So what do you got going in there? Is that Batman?
Yeah, this is it's kind of hard to see, but I figured I was going to jump ahead a little bit on inks so that it would show up. In the past, the Elmo has had a hard time picking up the pencil.
Yeah,
so,
a little bit.
Yeah.
We can see it. We can see it though. Actually, it's coming through pretty nicely.
Good. Yeah, this is basically I use a lot of what I call scribble sketching. That unfortunately, that's really not the greatest for demonstrating on the Elmo, because this overhead projector has a hard time picking up like really subtle pencil work. But oftentimes, whenever I'm sketching, I'm just laying down hundreds of lines until I kind of pick out the correct ones. Are we having some feedback? Yeah. Okay. That's okay. And eventually you start, after you've laid down just lots and lots of incorrect lines or lines that are more or less correct, you start picking out the one that you really, really want, and then you make that one darker. In this case, I'm using ink to do that.
Awesome. So is that a scribble sketching? Is that a technique that other people use? Is that common, or is that kind of unique to you?
I'm not sure. I've seen it a lot. Like if you look at key cell frame animation for like old Disney movies. If you look at some of that stuff, they have a very sort of scribble quality to it. So I don't know if they actually call it that, but it's probably something similar. That's
it sounds really good. It sounded like you knew what you were talking about.
Okay, that's
so
good.
Let's roll with that.
Part, at least.
Yeah.
So then from here, so this is what would be called like a contour line ink, which is just the structure of the piece. And then you start laying in shadows. So here we're going to have like a light source coming from above. So here I'm using usually you'd use like a brush to do a lot of this stuff, but here I'm just using a felt marker.
Hey Freddie, can you talk a little louder into the mic?
Sure. Yeah, it seems as if this mic is not is just out of balance for me, where if I talk too loud it feedbacks, but if I talk loud enough,
it may just be me.
Okay.
I could be messing up your presentation. So you're working on you just finished Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Batman, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Batman, that crossover just wrapped up in I think March or April, and that was a 6-issue miniseries that was a dream to draw. It was a fanboy dream come true of the fact that those two properties can that they do go together. I think all of us have probably played with the toys in a way that put the crossover together in that way, but to actually see them on the same page in that way was a real thrill for me and James the writer.
Yeah, it turned out it was such a really cool, entertaining series, and I think you guys really captured the tone of both franchises really well, you and James Tynion. It was really a really, really great book. If you don't have it, go get it. There are comics here that you can buy, believe it or not. So,
yeah, there's going to be a director's cut of the first issue, which shows just the ink wash. I did everything in gray values, so it's not just in the values, not just black and white like this. I used a bunch of shades of gray in the artwork.
Do you want to describe ink wash to the crowd here?
Good idea. Ink wash is diluted India ink. So India ink is what we use to lay down black values like this, shadows. And I just dilute it with water in different levels. I didn't bring any of that here because it's kind of a long process to draw in. But the diluted India ink, whenever you paint with it, it kind of looks like watercolor. It just looks like it's gray or black watercolor. And then if you layer it on top of each other, you wait for one pass to dry, and then you apply another wet pass, and they start to create these really cool textures and like sort of puddle looks to them, which is gives the artwork a really unique sort of gritty feel. So it works really well for a character like Batman or the Ninja Turtles being, in underground sewers or in back alleyways and that sort of thing.
When did you start using that technique?
I think I started using it a bit in a book called Captain Atom, which came out in the New 52. And that book I did a lot of experimentation on, and I used all sorts of different techniques, including ink wash and sort of like really wet looking India ink brush techniques for the backgrounds and stuff. And I used sketch and wash pencil and a bunch of other stuff. But that's where I started, and then from there I started experimenting with it on covers, and I did like a Conan 8-page story that I did every single page like that. And that was where my test was at that point, was like, how long, I'm only doing 8 pages, but how long will it take me? And it took me about 11 days. So, and that was before I then started getting more familiar with the tools and cut a little bit of time out. But, to make it in, doing a monthly book, usually you're trying to do a page a day. So that you can do in a whole month, like a 30-day month, you can do a full 20 to 22 pages with a couple days off. But with ink wash, because it's so much more laborious, it takes me probably a day and a half to do a single page. So that means that I am just under deadline the entire time. Like from day one, I'm just working as fast as I can. But I think that in the end, the finished end result is worth it. And so that's what I go for anyway, even though it's a lot longer.
Sounds fun. Yeah, party on, Wayne. Very nice. So anyway, you use a lot of different textures in your work, and is there any reason why you choose to do ink wash for some projects and maybe not for others? Yeah,
it depends on like if I was doing a sort of like a high technology sci-fi story, I doubt that I would do ink wash, because it looks so gritty and sort of organic and dirty on purpose, that the sci-fi story, unless it was a sort of a noir story like Blade Runner, that maybe is darker by default. If it was supposed to be like a bright, cheerful sort of Star Trek vibe, then I would probably use a clean pen and ink style that wouldn't even have as much detail as this. It would be much more what's called open, which is without detail and stuff, and a lot of it's filled in with color later, just so that the final artwork looks really clean. So it just depends on the nature of the book. And the new book that I'm working on that'll come out in October is He-Man Thundercats.
I love the plug. Worked it in.
But that and that one works. That one has some high technology in it, but it's much more sort of. It is not as gritty as Batman Ninja Turtles, but I'm still using an ink wash texture, but I'm just not going as far with the grit part of it. So, in the battle scenes, or, oftentimes whenever Lino is slashing at Mum-Ra or something like that, there's a lot of interesting textures you can get in Lino's skin, in quotes. It's actually fur. It's like, really short cropped fur. Or in Mum-Ra's really, craggly Egyptian mummy sort of skin. So that is ideal for ink wash. And then when it comes to like the clean scenes in Eternia, which is where He-Man is from, I open up everything a lot more and kind of go into that more sci-fi feel, that fantasy feel, where there's a lot less texture and stuff. So I'm trying to do one of the experiments that I'm trying on is to try to find a way to do those different textures and make them work, even though one is gritty and one is more open and clean.
Yeah, you seem to put a lot of thought into the work, and what exactly you need to do to convey all these different ideas and themes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the main thing. If whenever I'm saying that it takes me like a day and a half to do a page, that's like 15-hour days, and so that's almost every single day, no joke. And oftentimes, whenever I'm doing that, your brain, although you're rendering and stuff, and your brain is devoted to that, oftentimes you're doing execution, and execution doesn't take quite as much. You can think a lot. You can still sub-process ideas or thoughts. And so during that time is whenever I'm contemplating the other pages or the other approach that I might try on the pages. So in the end, I've put in, I've basically lived on each page, or I've lived the book, because it's the dominant sort of ideas in my mind the entire 6 months or year that I'm working on that project.
That's a lot of work, man. It's a longer day than I'm having. Jeez. So, I ask this every time we do one of these presentations. I ask the same question, but we have a lot of kids in the audience. I'm sure a lot of aspiring artists as well. Is there any tips or hints or tricks or things that you'd want to tell them and convey as they're maybe coming up?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I'm going to show this just because for contrast. All right, this is like a really fancy, pin set, and it's got all these different pieces of like art material in it that are unique and useful in different ways. If you're starting out and you're just working on like the basics of head structure and everything, you don't need any of this stuff. All you really need is a couple of like pencils from your school, like school supplies, maybe a bunch of printer paper and some good erasers. Like I would advise getting like a kneaded eraser and like a clicky eraser, because I erase more than I actually draw. I carry 4 erasers and only 2 pencils. So the point that I'm making is, if you're starting off brand new, don't feel intimidated by looking at all these cool, like getting the just the right kind of paper or just the right pencil or something. There's a long way to go before you really should be concerned with that stuff. It's more about getting your basics down of head construction and anatomy and that sort of thing. That's what I would recommend for the newer artists. And also, don't try to make the first line you lay down on the paper the correct line. That's why I was earlier talking about scribble sketching. I would recommend just sketching very freeform. Okay, in just a second I'm going to give this away to someone in the audience, but so let me actually just use so this would be like a scribble sketch. I'm going to do it just in ink though, but basically I'm not really sure. I'm kind of scribble sketching the same piece, like the same Batman head, but I'm just doing it again, and I'm doing it in pen. Like you can see, there's just an awful lot of lines in here, and none of them are quite correct. Like his eyebrow needs to go out further than that. It's like once I've laid something down, I know what to change. If you're doing it in pencil, of course, you can keep erasing. So right now I'm ruining the piece. Thank you, everyone. But but it's a way to get, I'm not sure exactly where this mouth should go. I know basically the proportion, but it's not until I start laying down a lot of lines. Like the back of his head is too short now. I realize that. So I can extend out the head, make the neck a little bit thicker. So I would recommend, this is a really long answer to your question, but what I would recommend for newer artists especially is to not feel like you have to make the first lines the correct lines. They can be incorrect, and that's okay, because you can just erase them. Just don't draw real dark into the paper, and then you can, from there, now I'm just using this as if this was like more of my finished pencil line. I would start picking the correct lines off of it, and I would then be erasing the rest of the piece.
It's really cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite trivia question in mind to give away this Batman sketch?
Trivia question. Let's see. Can't think of a trivia question. Has there been like a criteria in the other ones of these to decide who gets what?
I try to base it around like something you've done, or a book you've done, or maybe your first work at DC.
Let me see. How about what year was the first Batman story printed? Would that be good?
Sure. Does anybody know first year that the first Batman story was printed? 1939.
That's true.
All right.
That's correct.
Did he get it first?
1939. I heard the guy in the...
That gentleman right there.
All right, did somebody else get it first? All right.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that looks spectacular. Freddie Williams, thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause for Freddie Williams.